Good morning, everyone. I'm Rebecca Snyder with the Maryland-Delaware DC Press Association, and I am delighted to welcome you to the second of 3 parts in our census data series. I'm joined with Susan Licate and Joe Quartullo of the Census Bureau in the Philadelphia region, who will share some additional tools for the census reporting and census data that you can use in your reporting work. This, as I said, is the second of 3 series. You can check out our first session on which we recorded on our MDDC Press YouTube channel. We'll be recording this session as well. So without further ado, I'll ask Susan and Joe to take it away.
Thank you, Rebecca, and good morning, everybody. Welcome and welcome back to those of you that joined us in the first session. It is wonderful to be with you this morning, and I do appreciate your time. My name is Susan Licate. I am the Media and Partnership Specialist for the United States Census Bureau, Philadelphia region, and I am joined this morning by my colleague, Joe Quartullo, Data Dissemination Specialist. We are, again, pleased and privileged to be with you this morning on behalf of the U.S. Census Bureau. Joe, next slide, please. And so if you joined us last time, you'll know that we represent the Philadelphia Regional Office, and the region is comprised of the states of Delaware, Kentucky, Maryland, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Washington, D.C. And Joe and I are your points of contact. If you have data related questions or inquiries or are seeking training such as today's, Joe would be your person. And if you have media or partnership inquiries, please do reach out to me. Our contact information will be listed at the end of this slide deck, and you will have the opportunity to receive this slide deck. Rebecca will share that following this presentation. And within the deck, all of the links that Joe will be covering this morning, including all of the data tools, will be right there for you. So you'll be able to just one click and you'll be on your way. In this session this morning, we'll take a close look at Census Quick Facts and the easy to use platform, which is, I just love it because you can quickly find and download data, tables, and visualizations right into your stories. Joe will show you about how to use Census Quick Facts. We'll also go over data.census.gov and how you can access the socioeconomic and demographic data, as well as extracting those into a variety of formats that are suitable for your audience. We'll also touch upon the Census Business Builder, which is a nifty tool that will help you support stories on business trends, economic development, and your local commerce. And then finally, we'll come back to me where I can explain to you how to cite the U.S. Census Bureau information and that source information, as well as how to submit an interview request and request a subject matter expert to help strengthen your stories. So we are thrilled to be able to do that for you. So now it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Joe Quartullo. Joe, the floor is now yours.
Okay, thank you, Susan. And good morning, everybody, and welcome to our presentation. I've already been introduced, but I want you to know that I'm always happy to share my contact information, and we'll do that now and again at the end of the presentation. So I want to just mention a little bit about the Census Bureau. The Census Bureau is the nation's preeminent collector and provider of data about people and the economy of our country. So we make every attempt, that is, our goal is to provide the best mix of timely data, relevant data, quality data, and data for the cost collected in the right services provider, I should say, and cost for the data collected and services provided. The reason that we conduct the census, and when I say the census, I mean the census that's conducted every 10 years, is because it was put in the Constitution of the United States that as a requirement. representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the states according to their respective numbers. And as you know, the more people a state has, the more voice it has in the House of Representatives. The Constitution went on to say that the enumeration or count should be made within 3 years after the first meeting of Congress. Again, that was 1787, and within every subsequent term of 10 years. So that is the reason that every 10 years, or the year that ends in 0, we conduct the census. And the first one, based upon the Constitution, was in 1790. And now we just completed the 24th census of the United States in 2020. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the census, but also about some other data sources that the census is able to provide. Back to talking about the decennial census, you saw that it's required by law. It's in the Constitution, and it's also part of United States Code Title 13. I mentioned it's conducted every 10 years. It's a snapshot of a point in time. And for the past few decades, that point in time was April the 1st. So the 2020 census was all about what the nation looked like on April the 1st of 2020. We know that it's used to reapportion the House, but the states also use it for redistricting state legislative districts, state senatorial districts as well. And the federal government uses it to help distribute $675 billion a year through 300 different federal programs. One other point about the decennial census, the names are removed from the data. So it's confidential, and it's confidential for 72 years. Then the names are, we could say, reattached to the data and released by the National Archives. So the next census that we expect, will be released, would be next year. The 1950 census will be 72 years old. So that's a point that genealogists are very interested in. People that do research for great aunt and great grandfathers to want to know where they were living, who they were living with, what was the education of each person in the household, and a lot of other characteristics about the household and the people. As I said, we just completed the 2020 census now. So that's going to redistribute the members of the House of Representatives, but that will take place in the next Congress, which is the 118th, beginning on January the 3rd of 2023. And what the 2020 census told us is that the population has shifted around. And because the population has shifted around, the members of the House of Representatives in some states will have shifted around. So you can see the states in the gold here all will be losing 1 seat in the House. The states in the light green will be gaining a seat. Texas, the only state gaining 2 seats. And then the other states in the gray, including Maryland, will not be gaining or losing any seat. They will be staying the same. So I just wanted to point that out to you, that the census does have a big effect on the members of the House of Representatives. And this follows through to the presidential election, because for each member in the House, a state gets 1 vote in the Electoral College. So California, for example, will get 52 state votes for its members in the House, plus another 2 votes for the Senate. So each state gets the number of votes you see on the screen, plus 2 votes for the Senate. So the census has, as I said, been conducted since 1790, but there's been changes along the way, of course. And in 1940, the concept of sampling began, where most households were asked the basic demographic questions like the name and the age and race and whether or not a person was Hispanic, those types of questions. But then there were a sample of households that were asked additional social, economic, and housing questions. And that's the way it was for 60 years. But there was always a timeliness problem with that, and that the data was only being released and only collected and released 1 time every 10 years. So there was a solution to that timeliness problem, and that began in 2005, and that solution called the American Community Survey. What the American Community Survey is that same sample that I mentioned a minute ago, but instead of being collected every 10 years and linked directly to the every 10-year census, it's collected every 10 years to a sample of households. But it's a very big sample of households. It's 3.5 million addresses a year. And it it collects the information on all those other topics that I mentioned recently, like social, economic, and housing questions. All those questions that were asked in what we used to call the long form of the census were shifted over to the American Community Survey. So we can get that data now every year. And it covers about 40 different topics. It gives us 3 different releases. I'll speak about that in a minute, but we get a 1-year release and a 1-year supplemental release and a 5-year release. I'll address that in a minute. But what that left the decennial census with in 2010, and again now in 2020, is going back to those same basic demographic questions only. These are the only questions that were on the 2010 and 2020 census. Questions about, of course, the name of each person, and then these demographic points about each person, their age, whether or not they were Hispanic, their race, the relationship to the head of the household, and finally their sex. There was also one other question about the housing unit itself. Is it owned or rented? So that's what the decennial census has been now for the past 2 decades, because the American Community Survey kicked in 2005. And so just to make a distinction again between the two, the American Community Survey and the census, the American Community Survey, as I said, is a sample. It's a large sample, but it is a sample, and it gives us estimates of the characteristics of the population. Whereas the census, or the decennial census, is the official count that's used to redistribute the House of Representatives, etc. The American Community Survey collects all that detailed information, social information, economic information, for example, median household income, education, questions about and data about education, more detailed questions about housing, like the age of the housing and the number of rooms and the housing value and the demographic characteristics. But the census, as we saw, was only left with those basic demographic questions. The American Community Survey gives us these characteristics of the population, but the census is more interested in the population and housing totals. And as I mentioned, the ACS gives us data annually, where the census is only every 10 years. And then one final difference between the two, the ACS collects over a period of time. That's either a 1-year period or a 5-year period of time, where the census is all about April, or at least in 2020, it was all about April the 1st, one day, one point in time. So big differences between the two, but they do work together and complement each other. Now, I mentioned to you that the ACS produces a couple different estimates, and for geographies that are 65,000 people or more, large cities, for example, Baltimore or Philadelphia, the data is collected annually and then is released the following year. So, for example, for large geographies, currently the 2019 data is available. It was released in September of 2020. And so any large geography can get a 1-year estimate of what characteristics of their population was in 2019. But the smaller geographies, that would be less than 65,000 people, we collect the data for 5 years, because it's important that we have a large enough sample to be truly representative of the population as a whole. And in a small geography, like a small town, say with 10,000 people, there wouldn't be enough surveys collected in 1 year to be confident that that sample represents the population as a whole. So for smaller geographies, we collect the data for 5 years and then we release it. But we release it every year. So currently, for the smaller geographies, we have what we call the 2019 5-year estimate, but it was collected between 2015 and 2019, and it was released in December of 2020. Now, unfortunately, for both of these, certainly we know for the 1-year estimates were impacted by COVID. So there's going to be something different when the 1-year estimates are released for 2020. They're called 1-year experimental estimates, because there was a big impact on the number of households collected because of COVID. So the 2021 year data will definitely be impacted. It has not been released yet. And normally the 1-year data is released in September. So it's promised by the end of November, but it'll be limited in scope. The 2025 year data, which would be data collected between 2016 and 2020, the Census Bureau has not yet stated if there was an impact on that and how that would impact the data. So we're waiting to hear about that. But that's how COVID has affected the 2 data releases that we've been releasing annually every year rather, since 2005 when the ACS began. 2020 will be the first year that it was impacted in this way. So let's get back to talking about the 2 different, the census and the ACS. The census, again, the decennial only collects what you see in the top center part of the slide, plus a question on whether or not the housing unit is owned or rented. But the American Community Survey collects data on the population of all these other topics and then some. For example, educational attainment. If you wanted to know what percentage of Baltimore residents have a bachelor's degree, you can get that from the American Community Survey. Or if you wanted to know what percentage of the residents in Howard County speak Spanish in the home, you can get that from the American Community Survey. And all of those categories that you see on the left side under the social data that's collected. Then the ACS also collects economic data on households. For example, if you wanted to know how many households receive food stamps in Annapolis, for example, you can get that data from the American Community Survey. Or what is the median household income in Garrett County? You can get that from the ACS. So none of that information is available from the decennial census. We get all that from the American Community Survey. And then finally, we have information about housing, all of the categories that you see there about housing. How much do utilities cost? What kind of heat does the housing unit use? Is there a computer in the house? Is there internet service? All that information is collected in the ACS. So the ACS gets a lot more detailed information from the American public, but the census is the official count of the population and housing in the United States. So big distinctions between the 2. This is how the ACS works. It works in the same way that the census worked in 2020. Households, and when I say households, I mean a sample of households, are mailed a postcard or a letter with a code on them specifically linked to their address, and they're asked to go online to complete the survey. Now, because the ACS is a direct offshoot of the decennial census, it is required by law. And it does say that on the paper that the households receive, that your information is required by law. So approximately 50% of the households do that. Sometimes it's 45%, sometimes 50% of the households complete the survey online. For those households that don't complete the survey online, and that could be for a variety of reasons, from they refuse to complete the survey online to they don't have internet access in the house, or they're elderly and they don't know how to go online, or they don't have a computer available. For any number of reasons, for those households that don't complete the survey online, we mail a paper questionnaire. After a couple reminders, we mail a paper questionnaire and ask them to complete the survey that way. And then finally, for the households that don't complete the survey either online or by mail, for a sample of those households, we send someone out to collect the data. We call that the non-response mode. So when all these 3 different data collection techniques are put together, we usually get well over 90%, sometimes even 95% of the population to participate. And we're going to provide these slides, but should you want to look at a sample of the American Community Survey, you'll be able to find it in that link. I wanted to talk a little bit about census geography before we look at data, because census geography really is the foundation of census data. You can have all the data in the world, but if you can't link it to a place on the ground, it really isn't very helpful. So we recognize, I should say, 2 different types of geographies. You're probably most familiar with the political geography. That would be the state, the county, the townships, the cities, the boroughs, etc. even school districts and legislative districts. We consider them political geographies. But then there's also geographies that the Census Bureau uses, and some of them actually come from the Office of Management and Budget. That would be the metropolitan statistical areas. But these are geographies that people would be interested in, but they're not political geographies. So if you wanted a subdivision of an area of Baltimore City, you would look at the census tract, or even a smaller subdivision, the block group. Then there's also areas in states that are not officially recognized, but they are people want data for them. We call them census designated places. I'm not real familiar with any of those in Maryland. I'm sure there are some, but in Pennsylvania, we have Hershey, Pennsylvania. That's not an official place. It's not a state, a county, a township, a borough, but it is a place that people want data for. So we call that a census designated place. And we work with the local governments to define these census designated places. And then we also provide data at the zip code tabulation area, which is very similar to the zip code, but has some slight differences. And then you might be familiar with the metropolitan statistical areas. So geography can be complex. Here you can see a sign example of entering a geography and how it could be a little bit complex. But we always try to do our best to explain it and collect the data at geographic levels that people want. So when we look at this slide, which shows us several different geographies, and this isn't all of the geographies that we provide data for, but most of the geographies that people are interested in. And of course, you're familiar with the nation, and the regions are subdivisions of the nation, several states, and then the states, and going right down the middle, the counties. The counties are what we divide into census tracts. And then the census tracts, which are approximately 4,000 people, but could vary from 1,200 to 8,000. The census tracts could be further subdivided into block groups, which would be even smaller sections, almost like small neighborhoods. And then finally, the smallest geography is the census block. Now, you can get data at the census block for the decennial census, but the data for the census block is not available in the American Community Survey. And then other than the center part, or we call the spine of this, you might recognize most of these other geographies that we provide data for. Again, this is just to reinforce geography. We have a picture of the nation and state of California, Los Angeles County, a single tract in Los Angeles County. Then we have, that could be even split into block groups. And then finally, all the way down to a census block, which is almost like something similar to a city block. Back to a little bit about census tracts. As I mentioned, there are approximately 4,000 people, but they could range. They're a good size for ACS data. They're large enough to provide data for and be comfortable with the data. And then every 10 years, they're reviewed. And if a tract grows in population size, it's split. And if a tract shrinks in population size, say a large commercial complex comes in and they remove a bunch of houses, that tract may be consumed with another tract. So tracts are a popular way that we look at census data. Just to give you an idea of what Baltimore City would look like if we subdivided it into census tracts, it would be split. The city actually is split into 199 census tracts. So, in the center where there's the most population, the tracts are the smallest. And as we get away from the center, the tracts seem to be a little bit larger. That's an example of the census tracts in Baltimore. So if you were working with the city of Baltimore, or you wanted data about just about, let's say, the northwest portion of the city, well, you don't want data about the whole city. You want data on a specific area. You would find whatever tracts are there in the northwest portion of the city, and you would be able to get the data just for those. So you get data for smaller levels of geography, not only the city. So that's a lot of background, I guess more than a little background, a lot of background. I want to show you a few data tools. We're not going to have time for you to, practice with these or anything, but I just want to remind you again that I'm available if you have interest in any of these data tools, or if you want a webinar, individual webinar, or normally we come out and do presentations. We're not doing that right now, but if you were interested in a webinar for a specific area, I'd be glad to do it for you. We could look at the data tools much closer. So I'm going to switch over now to the data tools, but I want you to know that for each of these data tools that I'm showing you, there's going to be a slide in our presentation that shows you how to get to them. So you don't have to worry about writing that down. So I'm going to start with quick facts. If you give me a second here, I'll switch over to quick facts. That's one of the data tools that we have. You can get data for any geography in quick facts, or any municipality, I should say, in quick facts, as long as it has 5,000 people or more. So a small town, 3,500 people, won't be available in quick facts. But when we go to quick facts, the main page, which is what I'm at now, we get a lot of information about the United States. That's the default geography in quick facts. So we get population, demographic information, race, other information, for example, veterans and foreign-born persons, the numbers and percentages. We get information about housing, families, education, health, community survey. But this is just a taste or a sample of some of the data that comes from the American Community Survey, as well as information on business, income, poverty, and some geography. So here we're looking at the United States, but quick facts, we can select other geography. So I'll start with this time using, I'll say Baltimore County. So we want some information about Baltimore County. We'll just enter that for the US, but we have the information for Baltimore County. And this number right here is this number right here is the most recently released population from the 2020 census. So Baltimore County, 854,000 in 2020, and the number right below it was the population from the 2010 census. So you could see Baltimore County has grown, and also we could see that the US has grown. But then again, looking at the other data points, we could see sometimes there's significant differences, and other times there's similarities. Here's a significant difference, I should say. In the US, 18.5% of the population is Hispanic. If we go to Baltimore County, it's only about 6%. So Baltimore County has about 1/3 of the population. I should say about 1/3 of the population of Baltimore County is Hispanic when we compare that to the population of the United States that are Hispanic. I don't know if that came out quite right, but I think you get the message what I mean. And then we can look at other data points to look at similarities and differences as we go through this. Here's another point that most people are interested in when they look at census data: median household income. And we could see here that the median household income in the county is significantly higher than the median household income in the United States. So all of these data points are available in quick facts, but we can add other geographies to this. We can have up to 6 geographies in quick facts. So let's go with Annapolis and take a look at that, see how that differs, if that differs or how that differs. And here we got a much smaller population, about 40,000 or so, and we could see the differences in the characteristics of the population in Annapolis when we compare them to the United States. Let's look at the median household income out of curiosity. 85,000. So Annapolis has an even higher median household income than Baltimore County. And as I said, we could add up to 6 different geographies in here, but we are not only limited to tables. We could take data and put it in a map, and it's really easy. Just click on map, and then click on the geography that you'd like to have mapped, and you'll get a map of the counties, because we selected Baltimore County, so we'll get a map of the counties in Maryland. And let's wait till that loads, and we could zoom out a little bit. Okay. we're right now we're looking at the population estimates in Maryland from 2019, and you can see the darker counties have higher population. Here's the legend down the bottom, and the lighter counties have a less of a population. But all of those other facts that we just looked at in quick facts, for example, Hispanic or Latino, we could change the variable. So I'm going to change the variable not to population estimates, but to Hispanic or Latino. And now we have the percentage Hispanic or Latino in the different counties in Maryland. Again, looking at the legend down the bottom, the darker counties have higher percentage of Hispanic, and you can see the outstanding western part of the state here has a much lighter percentage of Hispanics. And as I say, you could change to any of the facts that we looked at in that table just by using this select a fact. But you could also take this data and put it in a chart very easily, again, just by clicking on chart, and then we'll stick with the county level data. We'll get, this is the same information we just looked at, Hispanic or Latino percent, but now we're looking at the counties in a bar graph instead of on a map. And you can see that Montgomery County looks like has a significantly high Hispanic population. And when I click on that, we could see that's 20%. And Prince George also about 20%. And then some of the other counties like Worcester, 3%, and Garrett even less, 1.2%. So you can look at the data in a table, you can look at it in a chart, and you can also look at it in a map. And if you wanted to, you could click dashboard and you'll get all three in the same page. So you'll get on the dashboard, you get the table, the chart, and the map. You can download this. Well, first I should say, if you click more, you can email this. You can take whatever's in the table and put it in a CSV file, then change it over to Excel. You can embed this page in a website, or you could share it on Twitter or Facebook. So lots of functionality or flexibility, I should say, when it comes to quick facts. Again, you can select up to 6 geographies, make comparisons. You can make maps with it. You can use a bar chart, dashboard, and you can share it by using more. So that is quick facts. That's the tool that's easiest, but it doesn't have all the variables in it. It has a limited number of variables in it. For example, if you wanted the number of persons Hispanic or Latino, it doesn't give you that in quick facts. You would get that from another data source. But that's the first tool that I wanted to show you. That would be quick facts. The second tool I wanted to show you is called the ACS Narrative Profiles. And this, I think, is good for reporters because it gives you that same data we were looking at, but it gives it to you in a narrative form. So you could easily copy and paste the paragraph, and you don't have to analyze the data. You could just take it right out of the paragraph. So let me show you what I mean on this one. This is ACS Narrative Profiles, and again, you're provided with the link in the other slides. This time we'll look at a place, and we'll move over to, I guess we can move over to Delaware since it's close by, and we will look at a place. And a place for the Census Bureau uses the word place to mean cities or boroughs, and in some cases it's towns as well. So cities or boroughs, in some places it's towns. So let's look at Baltimore. Oh, I'm sorry, let's look at Wilmington. And we will look at Wilmington City, Delaware this time. So I selected Wilmington City, Delaware. I could do this for a state or a county subdivision, which in some states we call townships, or a census tract, or any of these other geographies as well. But I'm choosing Wilmington, Delaware, and I'm going to get that narrative profile. And take a minute to run this. This is giving me data from the ACS 2015 to 2019 5-year data. So we get lots of data about Wilmington, but it's in narrative form. So for example, information about households and families in a narrative form. So if you needed to have this information, what percentage do married couples make up in the households in Wilmington? Married couples made up 20% of the households in Wilmington. And it gives you more information about cohabitating couples and female-headed households, etc., things like that. Then there's other information, other data points, marital status. That's a question that's not asked on the decennial census, by the way, but it is asked in the American Community Survey. So we could see that this information, 58% of males in Wilmington, that would be between, at rather above 15 or 15 and older, not younger than that. 58% of males in Wilmington have never been married. And you can see the other statistics there. There's a point on the percentage of grandparents that are responsible for the basic needs of their grandchildren. So that's another point that maybe a group that works with seniors or someone's writing about seniors will be interested in having that kind of a statistic. It tells us the percentage of native and foreign born. And in Wilmington, 94% of the people were U.S. natives. But for those that were not U.S. natives, where were they born? And here we could see where were they born. Most of those that are not U.S. natives in Wilmington were born in Latin America. Language spoken in the home is another data point. Geographic mobility, have they moved within the past year? 80% have not. Those that have moved, some came from another place in Wilmington, rather another place in the county, which would be Newcastle County, and then others came from a different county, different state, etc. Educational data about people that live in Wilmington. For example, people that have high school diploma or equivalency, 39%, some college, etc. And then information about the disabled. And this disabled question comes from the households themselves. So it's not from Social Security or any other point. This comes from the actual people. They're asked for each person, does this person have a disability? And we could see in Baltimore, 14% of household, or people, I should say, reported having a disability. That question goes further in the survey because it asks, is it a visual disability? Is it a hearing disability? Is it a mobility issue? So it asks for actual type of disability. Then again, we're still working in the narrative profiles, data about employment status and type of employer. How many people work for government? How many government workers live in Wilmington? 4,300. And it goes on to get the type of industry that they work in, and then information about their occupations, commuting to work. So 65% of Wilmington City residents drove to work alone. So there's people that are in the transportation industry that would be interested in something like that. The median household income. And by the way, if it has this here, you can get the same data in a table format if you want it. So if you wanted to have the data in a table format, you just click there and you can get it very easily. Median earnings for full-time workers and other information as well. Participation in government programs, health insurance, and then we have a pyramid, population pyramid, which shows, you've probably seen something like this before. It shows where the bulge is. It shows that that's the greatest population. And it looks like in Wilmington, we have a lot of people in the 25 to 29-year-old category. Now, sometimes that has a lot to do with education, graduate students and colleges in the area as well. And then we have some other information about Wilmington as well. So you could see there's a type of heating fuel used in the home. So you could see there that this narrative profile gives you a lot of information, and you could easily cut and paste this into a document or a story, and that would make it much easier for you then to have to go interpret a table. So I wanted to make sure that I showed you the narrative profile. That would be the second data tool that I demonstrated to you today. The first was Quick Facts. There's another point about when you go into the narrative profile link that I want to make sure that you're aware of. If you want to get a lot of data about a specific geography and not having to go, poking through the different tables to get that, you go to the same web page that gives us the narrative profile and click Data Profiles. And you get to pick a geography. It's not as many geographies, but you get to pick a geography. we'll pick a geography here. We'll pick, let's stay back in Baltimore, rather in Maryland, and go with Anne Arundel County. So we'll pick a geography, and instead of the narrative profile, we're going to get the data profile links. These are 4 different profiles about Anne Arundel County that give you a lot of information about them. So if you use this data frequently, I would suggest just print these 4 tables out, and you'll have a lot of different information about Anne Arundel County right at your fingertips. You won't have to go poking around every time. So you have a social, an economic, a housing, and a demographic table. Here you have the demographic and housing estimates, and you can see it gives you a lot of information. Not now we're looking at age, but we're looking at numbers and percentages for Maryland, and then next to it here we have Anne Arundel County, numbers and percentages. So 35,000 under 5-year-olds in Anne Arundel County, which is 6.2% of the population. But it's not only age, it's race data. You look at the numbers and percentages. And here we pick up with Anne Arundel County. We have information about the Hispanics and the voting age population. But that's only one of the tables, because if we go back to the narrative profiles, that was the demographic characteristics. We could look at the social characteristics. So this would give us a lot of information about education, type of household people live in, relationship to each other, marital status again. But again, now numbers. First, it always gives you the state first. You just slide over because we're working with Anne Arundel County. So again, we're numbers and percentages here for these selected social characteristics for Anne Arundel County: school enrollment, educational attainment, bachelor's degree or higher. 41% of Anne Arundel County with a bachelor's degree or higher. And that would be people 25 years and older. And other information about where people were born, whether or not they're a citizen, when they came into the United States, if they're not a citizen or if they weren't born here, language spoken in the home, different ethnic groups, number of different ethnic groups. For example, Anne Arundel County, again, 42,000 Italian Americans, which makes up 7.4% of the population there, on and on and on. So when I say narrative profiles, that page takes us here to get the narrative profile. But if you click up here, data profiles, you're also able to get those 4 data profiles that I just mentioned. So let me move on to another data tool now. Close these out and quick facts again, and go to data.census.gov. Now, the tables that we just looked at, those profiles, the social and economic profile that I just showed you, they come from this data point. They come directly from data.census.gov. So this is an easy website to remember. It's just data.census.gov. And you can do a number of things here. First, there's a simple search. So if we wanted to do a simple search, I'm always coming up blank in what I want to think of to make a selection. So I'll go back to Howard County, Maryland, and I can do a simple search and get a profile about Howard County. This is kind of similar to quick facts, right? All the basic information. These are the 8 most data points that people look for when they look for census data, by the way: the total pop, median household income, etc. So that's given in a simple search. We're looking at Howard County. And then we have something similar to quick facts in that we have these topics here. If you click on them, it will go directly to the topic. So these topics here get data for in data.census.gov in the simple search. But if you wanted to get more detailed information, and we'll stick with Howard County as an example, we'll go to advanced search. And this gives us a number of filters to work with. So I'm going to click topics, and I'm going to click maybe health and disability. So wherever there's a square here and I click on it, that's the final selection for that. you'll see a little chip, they call it, goes down here at the bottom. So right now we're clicking for, rather we're filtering out for disability, but we haven't selected our geography yet. So let's go back to geography, county, again, Maryland, and this time I'll have a choice. So I'll go with one I haven't thought about, Calvert. Again, I clicked on Calvert, the chip went down here for Calvert. So we're now, when I click search, we're going to get a bunch of tables that give us information about data for Calvert County, Maryland, having to do with disability. We get the top statistic that coming from the ACS, the number of people disabled in Calvert County. But we're waiting here for a bunch of tables to appear to give us an opportunity to go look deeper into the table. So looks like we're running a little bit slow today. I haven't run into this problem in a while. Give it another minute. If not, I'm going to move on. But what I could tell you is you would get an option to pick a bunch of different tables here having to do with Calvert County, Maryland, and disability. So as I said, we're having a problem here with the data, with the software, so I'm going to just go on and move on. But that is data, what you can do with data.census.gov. Let me try that data.census.gov once more, because it does have so many features that I really would like to show you that. Let me give it another shot. Sometimes it works a little bit when you try it again. I'll go with health and disability, and then my chip went down the bottom. I'll go with geography and county. And again, I'll click Calvert. And my chip will go down the bottom. Okay, this time it worked easily. So as I said, we're filtering for disability and Calvert County. We get the initial statistic up top, 8.2% of the population in Calvert identified themselves as disabled, but then we're going to get a lot of different tables that we could look further into that have to do with disability in Calvert County. So there's actually 113 tables. So you can break it down all different ways. Let's just take the top one, and I mentioned to you, we'll look at the characteristics of those that are disabled. So we get Calvert County, the totals, and then we get the number of people that identify with the disability by gender, by race, by age, etc. So if you needed this type of information, you needed to know how many people in Calvert County 65 and over identify as disabled, you can say not that the answer to that is 996. And there's 13,000 people in Calvert County that are over 65. So there's the percentage there, 7.2%. So with data.census.gov, you use filters, and the filters give you the opportunity to not only filter for a geography, but filter for a topic. You could also filter for a year. So if I only wanted this data from 2017, I would just click that. That would add, I put the 2017 chip now at the bottom, and now we're only going to get table data for here. We could see 2017 data for Calvert County. And we also, because Calvert is more than 65,000 people, we could see it's 90. So we have the option to get either the 1 year or the 5-year data for Calvert County. So that's data.census.gov. One other thing that it can do, it could give you good maps. So I will go back to data.census.gov. I do want to save a minute for Census Business Builder, but I'm just going to go right through on this one and show you what a map looks like. So I'm going to say geography. I want tracts, and I want tracts in Maryland, and I want the tracts in, we haven't picked one yet, Charles. And then I want all the tracts in Charles. I could identify an individual tract and get data for an individual tract, but I want all the tracts in Charles. That chip went down the bottom. And then topics, I want data on educational attainment. So I'm going to search, and I'm going to get tables for Charles County that have to do with educational attainment. Click on that. And here we have the first census tract in Charles County, which is 8501-01. And then as we go along, we can select all of the different tracts in Calvert County. It'll give us the data. I want population 25 and older with a graduate degree or higher. Let's say I want population 18 to 24 with a high school graduate that have a high school graduate. So I can look at this not only in a table form, but customize the table and click on the map. I'll get the map of all the tracts in Calvert County. And again, I wanted the educational attainment 18 to 24 that are high school graduates. So this is the data I'm going to select. Here's my legend. And we could see that the darkest tracts here in the county have this number of people, 18 to 24, with a high school diploma or equivalency. And the lighter tracts here in Calvert County have the fewest number of people with the high school diploma or equivalency. So that's just another feature that you could do in data.census.gov. Finally, I want to show you Census Business Builder. And again, you have the link for that. This is the fourth tool that I'm showing you. This is the splash page or home page when we go to that website. And here is Census Business Builder. There's two versions. There's the Small Business Edition and the Regional Analyst Edition. I'm just going to demonstrate the Small Business Edition to you. And what this does, it gives us an opportunity to select the type of business and an area, and then to get the data on both the type of business and the area. So I'm going to say food services. Now I'm going to get a list of food services, and I'm going to go with bakeries. So when I did that, it's telling me that in the US, there's 6,500 bakeries in the US, 6,500 establishments that are bakeries. I can click find my location, or I can put an actual geography in here. I'm going to go with back to Baltimore City. And then I could either select a map and look at a lot of the different variables on a map, or create a report. I'm going to show you create a report since we've looked at a couple of maps already. Then when I click create a report, I'm going to get a lot of information about Baltimore City. And then I'm going to get information about bakeries in Baltimore City. I'll just show you that if I scroll down to the bottom. Then we'll probably have just a couple minutes for questions, but I will have a couple of minutes, as long as this report doesn't take too long. While we're waiting for this, why don't I just say, are there any questions that I can answer for you hopefully this will come up while we're waiting for this?
If you select a town, is it
Yeah.
by zip code, or is it by the town limits?
No, if you select the town or city or borough, it's by the city or borough. It's not by the zip code.
We have a lot of
Are you
areas.
talking about it? Do you mean in this tool?
In any of the tools?
Oh yeah. No, you have your choice. You can get zip code data, or you can get data in a city. One thing about that though, a lot of zip codes cross city boundaries, so you have to be aware of that. Like I'm sure there's zip codes in Baltimore City that go. I know for a fact there's zip codes in Baltimore City that actually go outside of the city. So yeah, you can work with zip codes, or you can work with the city.
Okay,
Either
thanks.
one. Okay, let me just try this once more and see if we can get it to load. What it will do if it does come up, and if it looks like it may not, but if it does, it's going to give you a lot of information about Baltimore City. Then when you go down to the bottom of the report, it's going to tell you the number of bakeries in Baltimore City. It's going to tell you how many people work on average in each bakery. What is the amount of their salary? What is the typical salary in a bakery in Baltimore? And all of that information about bakeries in Baltimore. So this Census Business Builder, this is great for people that are thinking of opening a business, because you could get a lot of information about what's already in the specific area that you're thinking about opening. For example, a bakery, if you see that there's a lot of bakeries in Baltimore City, you might want to rethink that. You might want to rethink the type of business that you open, or you might want to rethink where you open it. It doesn't look like this is going to load, so, and I apologize for that. You can try it yourself. You have the link here for data Census Business Builder. I would maybe wait an hour or so. You know, I don't know what the problem going on right now is, and just put in a town or an area that you're interested in. And you saw how I selected bakeries, and then you can actually select that yourself. One other thing I want to say, a lot of this, we have something called Census Academy. I don't know if Susan plans to mention this, but a lot of the things that I'm speaking about today are in here. There's pre-recorded webinars. There's video clips similar to YouTube, 3 and 4 minute clips, how to do this and that. And Susan, I want to turn it over to you if you want to have for any final comments.
Sure. Thank you so much, Joe. And thanks to everybody. Always fascinating information. It all starts at census.gov. And with any of our data tools, products, resources, or any of the data that you extract, of course, there's no charge for any of that. Most of those tools are mobile friendly. And you do not have to download anything onto your computer or your device in order to use or access any of those tools. As Joe pointed out, the narrative profiles and those data profiles, those are all just copy, paste, grab and go. The visualizations as well are also free of charge. Joe, if you could pull up my slide deck quickly, I can close with showing how to cite the Census Bureau. So again, we welcome and invite you to use any of this census information, any of the data or the visualizations. That would be great. And so when you think so much, and we'll just go ahead a couple slides back.
Is that good? Oh, back? Okay.
Back one more again, and one more.
Okay.
All right, there we go. So how to cite the Census Bureau. So just always ensure that the website, data tool, document, or table URL, and the date that you access the information is on your citation. The example is shown on your screen. And of course, we welcome those requests for interviews. And when requesting an interview, we'll simply ask you the following information, which is your name and your outlet, of course, along with your contact information and your deadline. We do give priority to those things that are on the front burner, and we want to ensure that we turn around your request in a timely manner to meet your deadline. We also would ask if your piece is intended to be live or recorded. So if it is something that is on broadcast media, or if it's part of a story with other contributors, we'll ask you for your general line of questions as well. And this is to ensure that we have the most up-to-date information ready for you. As you can see, we have many surveys, over 130 surveys conducted each year. So there's always new data and data releases coming out, as well as if we need to secure a subject matter expert, or perhaps our regional director, or coordination with another federal agency, or a member of our data team, such as Joe. So we will ask you for that line of questions. And finally, we do have stock photos and B-roll available that corresponds with the 2020 decennial census that you can use with your stories. And we are happy to provide that link for you. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Joe, if you want to go ahead and forward to that last slide, you'll see our contact information right in front of you there on the screen. We welcome your inquiry. We are available to present one-on-one or small group training. If you'd like to have us talk to your newsroom staff, we're happy to do that as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We're here for you. And Rebecca, I will turn it back over to you. I thank you so much, and we appreciate the opportunity to be your guests again today.
And we are delighted to have you and Joe with us. This was always informative. I would flag for everyone that the third part of our census series will be November 3rd at 10 a.m. All of these, as I mentioned, are being recorded and available on the MDDC Press YouTube channel. And thank you very much for your time and sharing this information for us. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you. It's our pleasure.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.